Cuando quieras, Oscar.
Muchas gracias. Buenos días a todos.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming. Because on a Saturday at 10 a.m. you have to be very eager. Yes, we're going to talk about the blockchain. It is related to Bitcoin, but as you know, it's not exactly the same. How many of you know what the blockchain of Bitcoin is? This is going to be a very straightforward talk, but those of you who know about this, what have you heard about this blockchain? Probably that it's a disruptive technology that will change the world and solve the problem of hunger in Africa. Yes, this is just a slide of the cover of The Economist, which is not exactly a very progressive or disruptive journal, and it says that the technology behind Bitcoin could transform how the economy works. And this is another report by the BBVA saying that the blockchain technology is the ultimate disruption in the financial system. This is what the banks are saying. So you have to be aware of how much impact it has for the bank to be saying that. In another recent news item from the Bank Santander, who says that 20 billion could be the savings that the banking sector could make by using this technology. Here in Spain, Bank Inter invests in CoinPay. The BBVA also bets on the Bitcoin, and so as you can see, there is a huge interest in this technology, and it has a huge potential. We'll talk about it, but let's start from the beginning. We have said that the blockchain is related to Bitcoin. I'm sure you've all heard about how this started in 2009. Satoshi Nakamoto, somebody in 2000, of course that's not his name, but somebody publishes an article, a paper in a forum that's not very much noticed, saying that he had solved the problem that was open in the cryptographic society since the 80s, digital money. This is the paper he published. In the academic world, it was not very much headed, but later on, people started realizing, you know, that Bitcoin is a digital coin or a digital currency. Currency, a protocol, it is an anonymous system. It's not traceable in principle. Transfers are very, very fast compared to the traditional system, and it has so far very, very low commissions. It started in 2009, but the key word in this slide is decentralized. This is the first digital money system that really solves the problem. Bitcoin has and had the origin it had. You all know what Silk Road is about. This is a market. This is a real slide or a snapshot of when it was open. Everybody knew it was there, and nothing in this slide is legal, and this is how it ended. But Bitcoin is being used now for legal stuff. You can buy pretty much everything here in Madrid. It's been for a while accepted in the Serrano Street. This is the famous cash point in the Serrano Street. Have you used it? Whenever I go by, it's not working. It's out of order, but this is the origin. But I came here to talk about my book, so the blockchain, which is basically just one bit of the Bitcoin system. If Bitcoin is a car, the blockchain is just the engine. We could say that Bitcoin is a protocol it has the addresses, the identifiers for users, the PO W, which is what proves that we've used computational capacity, and then it has the blockchain. The blockchain is actually very simple. It's nothing but a register of distributed register of data. It is distributed throughout the world. It runs in all of the node of the network, and it cannot be changed. Anything that's registered cannot be changed in principle, and we'll see what problems that entails. So the blockchain is just one part of the Bitcoin system. But why is that different if the problem has been around for so long? Well, the fact that there is no central authority in principle is an advantage, because it means there's not a single failure point and there's no corruption. Bitcoin was generated to remove the financial system, or at least to set up a parallel one. So that's why it's all the more striking that banks are excited about it, and you cannot in principle ban it. Or only to the extent that you can ban a distributed P2P network. But what's interesting is that the Bitcoin is the first algorithm of distributed consensus. It solves the problem of the Byzantine generals, which is basically about how can we keep on computing and processing data in an environment in which we know that a high percentage of the node can falsify the information or resend it or send it changing it. So the generals can actually use the optical strategy to disrupt it, and yet it keeps on working. So it's the first algorithm of distributed consensus with anonymous participants, and with a considerable number of attackers that nevertheless keep on working properly. We're going to look at the mathematics of this, of how the network works. No, I'm joking. I'm not going to go into the maths. So, what does it look like? You cannot have a picture of that, but I like this representation. Just to take a look at it. If you look at the relationships between the blocks, etc., this is a graphic idea of what it could look like. I'm going to talk first of all about the possible uses, because this technology is proving or is being so demanded, and why is it the demand is so high, and then we will talk about the problems it entails. So the vulnerabilities and the drawbacks, because I teach at the university, I have nothing to sell. So the third part of the talk is what's usually not discussed. And what can we use it for? I'm going to tell you about three, which I think are the most interesting ones, but there are really hundreds of possible uses. The uses that I brought here are what I've called a digital notary, all the financial sector applications, and the connection with the Internet of Things. What is a notary, a digital notary? Well, we've said that this is a distributed data register. Imagine that we keep in this register. Bitcoin uses the blockchain to keep a register of the transactions that have occurred, and it stores all the transactions from 2009, from the very first one that Nakamoto did at the time until the one that's being done right now. So the memory used is 4 gigas, and it's still going up, but nothing forces us to store those inputs or outputs. We can store anything else. If we put a mortgage there, then it becomes like a digital notary. Imagine the advantages. How much we're going to save. There's no notary that's going to charge you 300 euros just for going through the door of their office. Because anybody could verify things at any point in time. There's no corruption possibility because with the notary system we decide to trust them, but they are as corruptible as anybody else. So we see that it has a lot of advantages, but there are problems, no doubt. And here I am still making friends because the digital notaries systems as they are set up right now do not work. They are not safe. They are not secure. But this system, it would provide integrity to the system and sort of guarantee the titularity of the document, but that's not true. Stampede privilege system. What they save is a hash of the document. You know what a hash function is? They keep a hash of the document, and that only ensures integrity, not authentication. Anybody can regenerate it. Imagine the situation, I discover the formula of a new wonderful soft drink and I store it in the blockchain using this system, and somebody steals the document and I lose my computer, or somebody generates a Trojan just to get that document. There are 3 million possibilities or ways in which you can steal the document from me. And 2 months later, that gentleman begins to produce the soft drink with my formula, and I have the document, but I had the document in the blockchain, and you have to, well, tell the judge and, well, explain to the judge what the blockchain is, and I've had to explain to a judge what an IP address is. Well, if you're able to go beyond all that, and we can really explain that the blockchain is safe, is secure, and that's been done in the States. So the judge says, okay, you say this is your document, and he calculates the hash function and he gets a number. But the stealer can provide the same document with the same hash figure, and they are both the same, so the judge cannot distinguish between who is the real owner. So you cannot guarantee ownership of the document. You can guarantee that the document existed at a point in time, but that doesn't mean, that's nothing to do with ownership. And these systems are also open. Anybody can send a document sort of pretending to be somebody else. If the system were to have real sort of legal, to be legally valid, you would have the problem of who sent it. We could do it by using digital signatures, but there is a problem because the way the blockchain works, in normal transactions you can only have 40 bytes. And that is a problem, so you will have to put several together, so you have to, the way it stands right now, it can only ensure integrity, but no ownership. I hope there's nobody from Stampede here, but anyway, they're angry at me already. Derived uses, well, imagine crowdfunding campaigns for projects. Smart contracts. The blockchain can also store small scripts. They do not have the capacity of other networks, and we will see a clearer example of this, and you'll understand that later on better. So we could say that only in certain circumstances that a contract is enforced, for instance, in the case of an inheritance. Another example, certification of the information in production chains and distribution chains. If you want to certify all of the steps of a production chain so that the producer can keep evidence that for instance, that the grapes are the right ones, so that the consumers with a QR code can check that there's been no tampering with those steps. It's another thing that the producer lies at the origin, at the source, but you can guarantee that nothing has been tampered with once they've been introduced in the blockchain. There's another concept that I really like, which is the digital democracy 2.0. Imagine we ask parties to keep their programs, since they say they are contract in the blockchain. But this is like, imagine, really, we would need Yoko Ono here to advocate this, because I cannot really see it happening. Imagine sort of vote systems that cannot be tampered with. You could set up that very quickly, something that could not be tampered with, not even by the government. I'm making a quick sort of overview, and so we will have time for questions on what really interests you later on. The other possible use that is particularly interesting for me is the Internet of Things, and I like it because in the blockchain nobody knows you're a fridge, and that's important because the blockchain allows those smart contracts that I was talking about earlier on. You can take that to a different level. Imagine a car or a house, a car that has a Wi-Fi connection capacity or can check with the blockchain system. So we could have a purchase and sale system. I make a transaction, I pay some money for the rental of the car, and the car knows that has been rented and relates that and changes the properties of the log to allow the person who's made a payment, and allows the owner of that key to access the car for a week, and then it sort of refuses the permission. And we can talk about rental, we can talk about purchase, etc. Another thing is that it allows for is micro-payment between devices, because it's not easy for a machine to pay to another machine. And for amounts that are below 1 euro cent, it's difficult to pay that amount right now, and there are already services for pay-per-use, for instance, to recharge your mobile phone. There are many services that would could benefit from this. And the third big use is that of the financial sector. This is the cover, the front page of the Santander report, whose conclusions were, I mentioned earlier on, the 20 billion savings. And look at the title, Rebooting Financial Services. That's quite striking. And there is a sentence that I heard from somebody in the banking sector in Spain. I found it very striking. He said, if we had this technology a while ago, we wouldn't have suffered the crisis that we've had. I don't know if he was exaggerating, but he was saying that the crisis was a problem of trust between banks, because they've been cheating on each other. So this system allows to give transparency to the system in a way that's completely unforeseen. So what are banks thinking or planning to do with this? Well, they are a bit lost right now. They are still beginning to feel the way, but there are huge opportunities there. We could think about replacing, and this is science fiction right now, but the SWIFT network that is used by banks to pay each other internationally with the Bitcoin system. You all have done an international transfer. It takes a few days and it's quite expensive, and the banks are interested in reducing that because it's also a manual process for them to avoid mistakes. And with this system we could have put any amount of money anywhere in 10 minutes. Because as you know, 10 minutes is the time that the transactions in Bitcoin take to consolidate. So this is in principle possible. What are the problems? with the current blockchain, well, the bandwidth. Blockchains was not designed for high demand and high disponibility. Or right now, the blockchain can process some 7 transactions per second, and that's incredibly small, because the diesel systems can process 45,000, around 45,000 transactions per second. Another problem for the banks is that there are no permits for reading and writing, and there's no identity, and that's why Bitcoin was how it was designed. But we're trying to take the blockchain from Bitcoin and see what it could be used for. And for some things it's very appropriate, but not so much for some others. There is the 51% attack, and right now we are at the 25% level, and that means that whoever controls more than 51% or 25% of the computational capacity of the network can falsify the what's going on, so the security disappears. Privacy of information, because banks don't want all their information to be public. And something else is that the development is unpredictable and free, and there's also the reputational issue. It's impossible for a bank to do transactions next to somebody else who's buying weapons illegally. So I think the banks are going to move towards an environment. The blockchain is public, but we can imagine it in an intermediate system. We could have public, semi-public, or private chains, playing with the reading and writing permissions. This is the Bitcoin option. It's public, everybody can read, everybody can write. Uses everything I've said already: digital notary, Internet of Things, etc. But we could have hybrid systems, chains in which the reading permission is public, everybody can read, but not everybody can write. Or not everybody can write, but this would be different for different possible uses. For instance, this would allow to have the audit by central authority. Not everybody, but the central bank could say, I want access to all of your account, and only a central bank could do the audit with knowing that it hasn't been tampered with. Of course, if the banks introduce information that's false to begin with, then that we cannot solve. The North American NASDAQ has a pilot trying to apply this technology, because if you could think about it, for a stock market it's very useful. You know what fast trading is? Well, this democratizes. If we sell and buy shares with this type of system, you democratize access. There's no advantage to being sort of 100 meters away from Wall Street. You also have to reinvent the blockchain to allow for this type of use. But the idea is potentially huge. How are we doing with time? I forgot to check my watch. Any questions so far? Because I really would like this session to be. What do you think about this? Is it okay? Okay, let's talk about what's not usually discussed, the vulnerabilities. What are the problems of the current blockchain in Bitcoin? I've selected a bunch. Software bugs, which exist and will keep on existing, scalability, the 51% attack, the selfish mining, and identity. Let's look at them in detail. Software bugs in general, the code. You know that Satoshi, a few days after publishing the paper, also published his client software, which is surprisingly well written. In general, the Bitcoin software is okay, but But there have been problems. For instance, this vulnerability in June 2010, which has been the most dangerous one, that allowed you to spend somebody else's money. It wasn't exploited, but it could have made the system crash. In August 2010, in block 274.63.8, there's an output or an outgoing transaction of 184 billions, or it was quickly solved with a patch and a manual fork, and they did see that there was a double expenditure of $10,000. In March 2013, and I suffered this one, and perhaps some of you, there was a mistake in the updating. Do you remember this? Did it affect you? The updating of the main client, there was a problem. And they had to do a fork for about 6 hours, and everybody was asked to go back to an earlier version of the client. So the main developers are very careful in the updating, but these are inevitable sort of events. I believe that there are no huge failures in the system, because the whole of the Bitcoin could allow you to the whole system to crash if there's a buffer on. That can do away with everything. But the best incentive is the economic incentive, and the developers themselves have said that there've been a lot of people auditing the Bitcoin code with the economic interest of improving incentives. And of course, I think there are no big failures, although there might be problems of denial of service, etc. Another vulnerability is that of scalability. Bitcoin has been designed to generate a new block by every 10 minutes, and the size is 1 mega, so you can do 7 transactions per second, whereas Visa can process 56,000. And that's particularly if you think that thousands or millions of devices should connect to the system and start transactions simultaneously. But there are ideas to improve that. The 51% attack implies that if there is a percentage of the web that controls more than 51%, can force a fork and manipulate the security of this blockchain. And this almost happened in June 2014. You know that they get together in the miners work in pools, and in June last year, one of those pools spontaneously got dangerously close to going over 51%, and they ask their own users to move to other pools, and so nothing happened. But this was about to happen sort of spontaneously without anybody planning, so no better evidence that it can really happen. So I ask myself, if you look at this distribution, whether Bitcoin is really distributed still. We have said Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency, a distributed cryptocurrency without a central authority, but it seems you could say also that it's a cryptocurrency controlled by a few entities, which are the pools. So there are 10, 12 entities that are actually controlling the pool. What are the drawbacks? Well, the Stratum protocol, which is the main one used by pools to distribute the blocks between users, prevents the control of the blocks by the miners. You cannot choose which one you want to mine, and 99% of the users don't mine. They only want to have the greatest economic profit, but you lose control. You are handing over control to the pool owners, and it has consequences on research. Because when you want to fiddle with the system and you want to test new attacks, you cannot do it, because when you send the blocks to be processed by the network, they are not processed the way you want them, because the pools have their own rules. So when you want to generate an attack, the attack is not successful because it's not processed in the way you expected it to. And the next attack is that of the selfish mining. The one that makes that the 51% attack becomes the 25% attack. This attack presented in 2013, I think it was on the corner table, and they used the following idea, and it's very simple. When you mine a block and you find the solution, do not publish it. And we will see now how. In the end, with just 25% of the hash rate, you get a lot more reward than you would deserve for that 21%. And this is how it works. Imagine these are the good guys and the bad guys. There are a bunch of us down here. The good ones are mining their blocks, and we, all of a sudden, the attackers, find a block. They find the solution. This is alpha, and 1 minus alpha. It's a proportion on computational capacity that they have compared to the whole network, which of course at the beginning it will be small because there are a lot more honest nodes initially. So the scenario is we find that block and we do not publish it. So we keep quiet, and from then on several things can happen. And the more likely one is that since most honest nodes have more computational capacity, they will find other correct blocks. So this is what happens. They find another block, and the attackers have to publish immediately the block that they had kept quiet about, and that will provoke a fork. And that means that the Bitcoin protocol says that when two nodes publish two solutions simultaneously in time, so that produces a fork, and you keep on working on both branches. So we're here. Other things could happen. It could happen that the good guys find the next block, so the attackers make nothing. But it may also happen that from this situation onwards, or after this situation, the bad guys find the next block, and in this case the good and the bad guys would save the profits, but it could be the bad guys who find the new block, and then they would receive more than they deserve. In the original block that's been found by the good guys, it's lost, and all the computational effort that was devoted to that is also lost. So the attack means at least the network will be a lot slower, because a great percentage of the honest or the good guys are working on something that's going to be completely useless. And during this period, the system would make it would be a lot more vulnerable to double expenditure. And if this tool proves to be more effective, if working in this way is financially more profitable than being honest, and most 99% of miners, their priority is making money, then they could switch to this way of working, and if a high percentage of miners did it that way, they would immediately have control of the network, and they would have that control forever, because they would always be ahead of the honest miners, so they would become the owners of the system. And unless they went below that 25%, they will never lose that power. They could do whatever they wanted with the system. They could make false transactions, and that's a big problem.
¿Qué más cosas?
What else? There's this other problem, as I see it, the greatest problem when we talk about blockchain. For example, you get this question, can we set up Airbnb, Uber services that are fully distributed, as the same example of the car that I gave you before? Well, would you rent an apartment on Airbnb without knowing who that person is, where you don't get any information, you only have a phone number, no person identified? That's unthinkable. In order for the blockchain to be to start being used as a distributed service, we need to sort out this problem with identity. It's a difficult cryptographic problem, but it still needs to be sorted out. So, as I see it, this would be the fifth greatest pillar. And that would be all. I would like to have your questions now. Thank you very much.
Venga. ¿Qué hora es, Jorge?
What's the time, Jorge? Over there, I think. Morning. Hi, Jose. How are you doing? Good. I don't know if you mentioned it before because I came in a bit late, but what if the Bitcoin limit that is mineable is reached? What if? Especially financially speaking, can we think of it as an alternative to the existing financial system? You might not know it, but the number of bitcoins is limited. The system is defined for 21 million coins, and that's it. It is estimated that half of them have been mined already, and it's estimated that by 2140 the last one will be found. Actually, it will be much more expensive to mine them. It will cost much more money to find them than the reward that you can get out of them. Actually, when you find one of the solutions, 25 bitcoins are given in reward, and this is being halved and halved, so it's less and less profitable to mine. Well, in a nutshell, it's designed not to be fractionable. That was the rule, the standard. So initially nothing would happen. We would reach some kind of break-even point, and it would be based on offer and demand and supply that be inherent to the system. That's how it would work. No problem there, because the minimum unit is Satoshi, that it's 10 up to the minus 18 power. We could narrow it down so much that there will be no problem there. The current problem now with Bitcoin, maybe you don't know about it, but it would be volatility first. It's above $1,000. Well, actually now it's 200 something euros. A couple of weeks back it was about 400. So you see there's this volatility, ups and downs. Since there is no direct relationship, there is no backup for the reliable coin underneath. I think there was another question up there. Good morning. Congrats on your presentation. Very interesting. What about the 25% attack? I didn't really understand. So, if a miner is not publishing the validated node, why the correspondence goes up compared to the honest miner? Well, here, no reward yet, but this is here when it all starts. Maths are complicated. It is long-term win. When he makes most of the money is here with the second block when it's found. Then he posts, or they post both, they publish both, and get the fees from both blocks. Both, yes, but if the honest miner were to validate both, he would also get the reward, right? Yes, here only his or theirs. This is the branch to be followed, this one. And the attacker would get the fees for this block. And the whole network would get the fees for this second block. I didn't bring the maths with me because it's a bit complicated, but we need a long-term study of the system. By checking out each of the scenarios individually, well, there's no win. You need to mathematically prove that it's an optimal, super optimal strategy above Bitcoins, and it's part of the article. Details a bit nitty-gritty, but I can give you the reference if you're interested. And there you see where it's been proven that only with 25% you're making more money than it would actually you would actually get with that exact percentage. It's not just above the network, but actually more than you should be entitled to with just 25%. And on top of that, you have the chance of cooking transactions, handling transactions. That's the main advantage. You would be kind of a bait attracting people. If you mine it like this, you will make more money. People would start mining like this. Actually, some miners may be doing so. This attack was published in 2013, and we don't know if someone's doing so. It might be the case. I don't think so, because there would be fogs much more often if this was the case. But the minute we have miners making enough compared to the network percentage, that would be a problem. What concerns me the most is that this becomes permanent. If 25% of the network starts mining like this advantage of 2 blocks would be permanent. They would always be ahead of everyone else, because the minute the network finds one, they would publish the previous one. It could be kind of a race. I find 2 blocks, so I'm 2 blocks ahead of you. You find one. Okay, so I publish one, and I'm ahead of you once again, so you will never catch up with me. And that's why it's so dangerous. I had this other question. Taking account of volatility of currency, prices going up and down, would you favor the coin? I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I do have Bitcoins, probably many of you as well. Difficult to say. It's hard to say because Bitcoin's blockchain, I don't think it'll be used that much. All the applications I mentioned probably will be finally implemented with Ripple or Ethereum, which are other systems. You are familiar with them, I guess. Ethereum's basically, well, I explain, this is a distributed data record that we have. So if the blockchain records data, Ethereum records programs, so chunks of code that would be distributed from computing. And it's incomplete Turing, actually. And so you can have a program as complicated as you want it to be. So probably this will be implemented on one of those systems, because Bitcoin's blockchain was not designed with this in mind, so probably. But it's been quite a contribution, this idea of a blockchain, just a concept. It's amazing, it's mind-blowing. And that's why people are so excited about it, because actually it sorts out the problem that was out there. But still, Ethereum or new designs will come in, and yet Bitcoin's blockchain, as I said, will be there just for currency support. And I find it difficult to have this coin out of its niche, because you've got the usability gap out there. Still difficult to use Bitcoin, as you see. Varoufakis, the former Greek financial minister, he was a bit upset. You want me out of the euro? I will leave you and I'll use Bitcoin as a currency. It was a bit silly. And yet, as I see it, Bitcoin's currency, I don't think we'll get out of the niche. This idea of blockchain, of course, will make it out of the niche. You say Bitcoin to banker and you upset them, but blockchain, they like it. They like the idea itself because it's aseptic, so it can be used elsewhere. And there's another myth. Can you take the blockchain away from the coin? Well, no. The blockchain is safe just because there is a currency support, because there's this well-known working tests, that's the mining, that's how they're trying to incentivize people, encourage them to behave, to work just for the good of the community of the network. If you take up the working test, it will crash. The system will not work. So banks come up with other solutions such as signature bank, etc. But that's not a blockchain, right? So a blockchain makes sense just if it achieves its full potential within an environment where there is a more or less public access. If you restrict to a private chain and a graph such as well-known participants, only limited amount, there you don't need a working test system. You can have it organized using well-known cryptographic logarithms. You need it to have its potential developed outside. Any more questions? I'm blinded by this. Like, hi. 2 questions related to what's been asked already, but yet, as part of identity, this chain of trust. Yes. You say that it's cost effective, but yet there is a lack of identity. That would be from the point of view of blockchain for private use, such in the bank. There you need signature, right? But for the public or a public use, I guess the only way to make sure that a person is who they say they are, or that a signature is theirs, would mean that we need to have a central authority in place, a passport, a support, whatever. And then for private blockchains where you only have a limited amount of nodes, the incentive for an outside attacker, not for the participant, which is very high, but with a limited attack capacity, you can actually subvert a system like this. Is there any research on the topic? Any way of counteract it? Well, last thing you mentioned is very interesting. Yes, let's set up banks. Let's set up a series of blockchains for us. For ourselves. How many banks are there in Spain, in Europe? A couple hundreds, right? That's not safe because we only have limited participants, and so this system cannot be just transferred to the banking system just like that. And the identity, yes, it's interesting. If we want to preserve a well-certified traditional identity, you need to have it connected to a PKI, which by definition is very central. There's nothing more central than a PKI. And we have distributed identity systems, but they don't work for traditional sales systems. To, well, Airbnb or Uber, would you rent your house to someone on who you have no information can be found on them? So this is all based on multi-signature custody systems that work as the middleman and use multi-signatures for the use of those elements. So instead of paying you, the end user, because you want to rent my house for a distributed service, instead of paying you, I pay a custody system, and we use a multi-signature system, so they cannot use that amount of money without my authorization or yours. So if everything works out, you get the payment. This is a trust triangle. This is the only way to do so. It is just crashing the this idea of trust. I've thought of it. I thought how this can be linked, because those are public keys all in all. And in the end, we start with public keys from passport numbers, and then we generate and produce the keys and elliptical curves on Bitcoin. But the minute you do so, there is no canceling. I'm trying though. Traceability. On your first slides, you say that it was not traceable when all transactions are on the network and are visible at all times. It's not anonymous, but it's traceable. It's not the same, right? Yes, I was not clear. What I meant is that you cannot take it all the way down to a physical identity. That's what I meant. It is fully traceable, as you put it. Maybe I was not clear enough. It's not identifiable, maybe. It was a misnomer. It's not fully anonymous either. There is a interesting paper where they managed to find the identity with a CryptoLocker, this well-known malware. Using clustering techniques, they managed to set that some big Bitcoin addresses should be those of the CryptoLockers creators or authors, so they managed to identify that. More questions? No more questions, so thank you very much for your attention and for getting up these early. Thank you very much.